Pffft. Rachel Piffle was the quietest girl in fourth grade. She spoke so softly that no one, not her teachers, her classmates, or even her parents, had ever really heard her voice. For this reason, she was often overlooked. On Tuesday morning, Mr. Jupiter asked, "Is anyone absent?" The students looked around. "Rachel is," Missy finally said. Rachel, who was sitting at her desk, said softly, "Pfft." No one heard her. "Anyone else?" asked Mr. Jupiter. The students looked around again. "Mm, just Rachel," said Emberly. Rachel said again. Mr. Jupiter wrote Rachel's name on the attendance slip. "Ashley B," he said, "will you take this to the office?" Rachel tried one last time. No one heard her. Mr. Jupiter clapped his hands. "Everyone line up, please. It's time for music." Rachel loved music. "Phew," she said joyfully. No one heard her. In the music room, Mr. Halfnote passed out instruments. A triangle for Ashley Z, a tambourine for Bernadette, a slide trombone for Stanford. "Pfft," said Rachel. Mr. Halfnote didn't hear her. Rachel helped herself to a pair of cymbals. "Today," said the music teacher, "we will accompany ourselves as we sing the battle hymn of the Republic." In the back row, Rachel shivered in anticipation. Music time was the only time she felt free to raise her voice. Mr. Halfnote tapped his baton on his music stand. "Instruments up," he said. He held his hands in the air like a conductor. "And a one, and a two, and a you know what to do." He gave the downbeat. Calvin pumped his accordion. Victoria strummed her zither. And Melvin rang his cowbell. The class sang out, "Mine eyes have seen the glory," confident that no one could hear her above all the racket. Rachel banged her cymbals together and bellowed, "His truth is marching on." It felt marvelous. When they got to the song's end, Mr. Halfnote hollered, "Big finish! Big finish!" He waved his baton wildly in the air, then pointed it at Jackie, who was playing the kettle drum. Jackie put all her heart and muscle into it. She pounded the drum. She pummeled the drum. She, "Heads up!" she yelped as one of the club-like drumsticks flew from her grasp and whistled through the air. It bounced off Ham's forehead. "Yeah!" Bashed into Bruce's upper lip. "Ouch!" Ricocheted off Lil's eyebrow. "Owie!" Banged into Missy's tummy. "Oh!" Glanced off Rosa's knee. "Yowza!" Bopped into Victoria's backside. "Ah!" Smashed Bernadette's pinky. "Ooh! Ooh!" And rolled to a stop at Rachel's feet. So lost in the music was Rachel that she didn't notice the flying drumstick, her wounded classmates, or the fact that everyone else had stopped singing and playing their instrument. Instead, with her eyes squeezed shut, she belted out, "Glory, glory, hallelujah." The others couldn't believe their ears. Rachel Piffle was. "Are you okay?" cried Amisha. "She must be hurt if she's screaming like that," Emberly said to Bernadette. Melvin shook his head in confusion. "When did Rachel get here?" The others just ignored him. Dropping their instruments, everyone raced to her side. At that moment, Rachel opened her eyes and turned as red as Mr. Jupiter's Japanese kimono. "Are you bleeding?" asked Victoria. She rubbed her bruised backside. Rachel said softly. "How many fingers am I holding up?" asked Bruce, and he dabbed his swollen lip. Rachel said. "Speak to me," begged Ham. "Speak to me." He swiped a trickle of blood from his forehead. Rachel said. "The nurse," cried Mr. Halfnote. "We have to get her to the nurse." Rachel's cymbals crashed to the floor as the music teacher flung her over his shoulder and dashed down the hall to Nurse Bettatine's office. Bruised and bleeding, the others staggered behind him. Tell me where it hurts, said Nurse Betadine after Rachel had been placed on the cot. Rachel said. Nurse Betadine applied a compress to Rachel's forehead, an ice pack to her knee, and a splint to her pinky. Will she be okay? Asked Lil, massaging her throbbing elbow. I don't know. Nurse Betadine frowned with worry. Popping a thermometer in Rachel's mouth, she shooed the others back to their classroom. Alone with her patient, the nurse began to fret. Does she need an ambulance? She asked herself. A hospital? A surgeon? Finally, as a last resort, the nurse unwrapped a band-aid and stuck it on Rachel's backside. Good! I feel good, Rachel sang out. Nurse Bettatine looked startled, then smiled. I knew you would, she said. Those band-aids work every time. And she sent Rachel back to her classroom. Minutes later, Rachel took her seat behind Victoria. I hope Rachel's okay, Victoria said, and she pressed a wet paper towel to her bruised backside. Rachel said. I hope she doesn't miss too much school, said Bruce. He dabbed the blood from his lip with a tissue. Said Rachel. Maybe we should send flowers, said Rose. She wrapped an elastic bandage around her stiff knee. Rachel said, Daisies would be nice. Ham looked up. I think I'm hearing voices, he said, rubbing his bruised forehead. He added, I think we should send her some daisies. Good idea, agreed Lil. Rachel said. And the moral of the chapter is the squeaky wheel gets the grease.